could be more iconic than the thumpy bass lines, twanging guitar riffs, and rhythmic beats of classic American rock and roll music. Immortalized forever through singers such as Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee Lewis, rock and roll music will surely be remembered as a piece of classic Americana. Rock and roll, however, wasn't always culturally accepted, despite now being a staple of American music. Its fight for freedom not only led to new music, but also paved the way for modern America as we know it. So rock and roll music began indisputably in the 1950s. However, the roots are apparent in early music such as jazz, R&B, and country the preceding decades in the 30s and 40s. Some of the earliest rock musicians include Bill Haley, Gene Vincent, Wynonie Harris, and Jackie Brenston. Jackie Brenston being the singer, often credited with his partner Ike Turner singing the very first rock and roll song ever, Rock 88, in 1951. The song was recorded by Sam Phillips in 1951, and Sam Phillips being the guy who also ran Sun Studios in the later 50s. And Sun Studios is one of the most popular, famous recording studios of all time, being home to Elvis, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee Lewis in the later 50s. The term rock and roll became popular in 1951 after famous disc jockey Alan Freed described the music he played on his radio station. And at the time, to be fair, the radio station was almost entirely comprised of black music, and the audience almost entirely comprised of black members. And this was mainly because, at the time, rock music was such a big shift from the doo-wop and the jazz and the crooners and stuff before the 50s. Rock and roll was so rambunctious, it was a big shift, so even white musicians felt uncomfortable being played in the same stations. It just wasn't a popular thing for that to happen in the early 50s. And that's not to say that people didn't like it, because after the initial discovery of rock and roll sounds, rock music began to enter the mainstream through white musicians and DJs alike. So while many teenagers leaned towards the black music, the influx of white singers singing rock and roll music made parents and a lot of people feel safer about letting their kids or listening to rock and roll music themselves. So in 1954, Bill Haley released the most famous rock and roll song of all time, Rock Around the Clock. And this is still today one of the top 3 best-selling records of all time ever in history, selling like 40 million something copies. This song's extreme popularity led to the explosion of rock and roll, and its inclusion in movies and radio stations all over the world really led to rock and roll entering the mainstream, big time. So now in the mainstream, rock artists such as Little Richard, Buddy Holly, Dion the Belmonts, and Ray Charles, and of course Elvis Presley took the stage as some of the most successful singers of the 1950s. And some of them were black, which was a big change because before this time, of course, black stations and white stations, radio stations and records, that was all they really had. Mixed groups and mixed stations were really very foreign up until the mid-50s. So although many had learned to appreciate or at least accept rock and roll, many felt the music was the devil's. Religious figures condemned the music for being ungodly, and government officials often successfully banned the music from being played on radio stations and sold in stores in their cities, which is pretty scary looking at it from today's point of view. But at the time, that was very popular that they would ban songs and music from playing on the radio just because it was too loud or too foreign to the listeners. So government officials claim rock and roll music caused juvenile delinquency and the downfall of the clean-cut, square teenager of the previous decades. So although rock and roll music has branched from rebellious, anti-authority musicians in the past, its legacy lives on and reminds both audiences and songwriters to go their own way and accept what's different. Rock and roll's effect has gone much farther than just creating new music and breaking boundaries, but has also played important roles in teaching lessons of acceptance to many. So I hope you've learned something from my speech, and I hope you learned some new information regarding rock and roll music in the 1950s, and have also identified some of its lasting impacts in our world today. Rock and roll music will live on forever in both its rhythm and those who it's impacted. And there's my dad right there. There's my girlfriend and my dog. And there's my mama. Yay.